her voice is one of those voices that I love, but I feel like everyone loves. Just hearing her sing makes everything in the room completely stop. And you can tell in her music and in talking to her about bands that she's also a total music fan. We are all so lucky to have her be a part of our lives. Here with this very special presentation, please welcome Susanna Hoffs.
Thank you, Fred. I'm absolutely thrilled to be the person who gets to acknowledge Peter Asher tonight for his long career of musical excellence and the joy and creativity he has brought to all of us. At the height of the pandemic, I got a call that Peter was interested in working with me on a record. That call was like sunlight breaking through the clouds. It was hope and joy. Peter had produced records that changed my life and cemented my path as a musician. James Taylor's Sweet Baby James, and Linda Ronstadt's Heart Like a Wheel. I taught myself to sing along to these records. I literally wore out the vinyl. Peter's productions enchanted me and shaped me. I don't know that I'd be doing this, making music, my life's work, without the influence of those records. Peter's musical touch and sensitivity are unique. Every moment and the spaces between moments are a lesson in craft and artistry, singular to Peter Asher.
Please Lock Me Away. With those words, Peter and Gordon took the forgotten Lennon-McCartney song A World Without Love to #1 on the charts. It launched a 5-year reign as British pop royalty, and for Peter Asher, a career of 6 decades that has spanned and helped shape the history of modern pop music. From the British invasion of the 60s to the California rock of the 70s, pop pioneer Peter Asher had a fundamental influence on the course of contemporary music that is still felt today.
I'd like to introduce 2 young men who have been hailed as the greatest import since the Beatles, and they have gold records to prove it.
It began in 1962 when a teenage Peter and school friend Gordon Waller formed a duo, singing Everly Brothers style harmonies. Those were the days, my friend. When Peter and Gordon broke up, former housemate Paul McCartney asked Peter to join the Beatles' newly founded Apple Records. There, he helped sign Mary Hopkin, Jackie Lomax, and Badfinger. But the artist that changed everything was a young, unknown American. His name was James Taylor.
Yes, I'm gone to Carolina in the mine.
Asher produced Taylor's debut for Apple. It wasn't a hit, but he was so certain of the talent, he resigned from Apple and moved to the U.S. to manage James.
And rock-a-bye, my sweet baby James.
Asher continued to produce many of James Taylor's albums, including Sweet Baby James, for which he received his first Grammy nomination, and Mudslide Slim and the Blue Horizon, featuring the indelible Carole King cover, You've Got a Friend. Recommended by James's sister Kate, Asher took on another vocalist with a timeless voice, Linda Ronstadt, and he produced a remarkable series of albums for her. In LA, Asher set up one of the most respected management companies in the business. He handled Taylor, Ronstadt, and others from his office around the corner from the famed Troubadour, epicenter of the exploding folk rock movement, and close to the Roxy Theater, in which he was an early investor along with fellow managers Lou Adler, Elliot Roberts, and David Geffen.
Your good day is about to come to an end.
Asher played a pivotal role in shaping the California rock sound, producing records for Randy Newman, Kenny Loggins, J.D. Souther, Andrew Gold, and Bonnie Raitt, as well as Neil Diamond and Diana Ross. He worked on hit albums for artists as diverse as Cher's Love Hurts, and 10,000 Maniacs' breakout In My Tribe. And he produced his friend Robin Williams' Grammy-winning Best Comedy album. Spending a decade in the corporate world, Asher joined Sony Music Entertainment as Senior Vice President before returning to management as President of Sanctuary Artists.
You got a friend.
In 2007, Asher reunited with James Taylor to produce Live at the Troubadour, the reunion album with Carole King and Taylor's original band, The Section.
When you cry like a rainstorm, howl like the wind.
Asher's body of work has earned him 13 Grammy nominations, twice winning the coveted Producer of the Year award. And he's also been honored with a CBE, Commander of the British Empire from Her Majesty the Queen. It has been an extraordinary ride. In recent years, Peter has toured with guitar legend Albert Lee and with Jeremy Clyde of sibling 60s duo Chad and Jeremy, as well as with his own group, which includes Kate Taylor, Albert Lee, and Leland Sklar.
I've seen fire and I've seen rain.
Peter also continues to regale new generations of audiences with his legendary tales, publishing a book about his personal reminiscences with the Beatles, hosting a Beatles radio program, and touring with his multimedia stage show. From London to Los Angeles, pop singer to top producer, personal manager to music professor, Peter Asher has lived, overseen, and chronicled the living history of popular music for more than half a century.
I don't care what they say, I won't stay in a world without love.
The truth is, I feel like I've known Peter my entire life. I remember being entranced by the sound of his voice coming through the car radio as a little girl. A World Without Love is one of my earliest memories of hearing voices blending together, and it most definitely informed the sound of my band, the Bangles. I could never have imagined in that moment what getting to know Peter as a human and as an artist would mean to me. Peter, Wendy, and their daughter Victoria welcomed me into their world this past year. They are like family now, and Peter is a cherished friend and collaborator. I often say that music reminds us of what it is to be alive, to be human, to be connected. Working with Peter and his dream team of musicians was the ultimate connection. Jeff Allen Ross, Cooch, Danny Korchmar, Leland Sklar, Waddy Wachtel, Russ Kunkel, and Albert Lee. If you were a fly on the wall during the tracking process of our record, you would have seen me dancing the Watusi through the whole experience. I have the greatest love and respect for these artists and our producer extraordinaire, the always dapper, the discerning, the perfectionistic, the dedicated, and now the newest member of the Namm Tech Hall of Fame, the dear Mr. Peter Asher.
Thank you very much. I truly feel honored. It's an extraordinary thing to happen, and I thank you all very much, especially to this audience. It means so much, and I really appreciate it. Looking back, you know, the 21st of January, 1964 was a Tuesday, and it was a very significant day in my life. That was the very first time I ever went into a real recording studio. I went into EMI Studios on Abbey Road. It wasn't called Abbey Road Studios yet. It was EMI on Abbey Road to record, because my school friend Gordon Waller and I had got signed by EMI, And we had a day in the studio to cut 4 or 5 tracks and see if we could come up with a single. I love the recording process. We were recording, by the way, for those of you interested in this particular audience, on one of those Studio 1-inch 4-track machines, which sound, this is the only audience where a tape machine gets a round of applause. And and they were wonderful. And by the end of that day, a few important things had happened. One of them being that I'd already decided I wanted to be a record producer. Once I saw what a producer could do in terms of shaping the song, having ideas, telling brilliant musicians who play infinitely better than I do, telling them what to do, which I think is a miracle. And people actually try out your ideas, and it's been a pleasure. And so production has always meant a huge amount to me. Even though I've been very lucky and get to play so many different roles, you know, writer, performer, broadcaster, consultant, and all this other stuff, if I did have to pick one single favorite occupation, it would be record production. So I have to thank for this award not only the tech committee, but Namm as a whole, and all the brilliant people who attend Namm and what they give us, all the great technology, the amazing instruments, the incredible inventions, which of course sonically flourish in the hands of brilliant engineers who are so important to production. I mean, if you think about it, it's no wonder I've been able to make some records that sound pretty good. As engineering, I have worked with Jeff Emmerich, George Massenburg, Nathaniel Kunkel, Lynn Earls, Frank Wolf, Frank Filippetti, Al Schmidt, Ed Cherney, Nico Bolas, Val Garay, and so many more. And there are some brilliant new engineers too, like Susie Shin, who's now become an incredibly successful producer in her own right. And so many great musicians. Obviously Cooch and Waddy and Lee and Russ and all my old friends, but so many terrific players out there now too. And so many beautiful instruments and devices. You know, I admire them all. Everything from my original 1964 J200, which is my favorite acoustic guitar in the world, to my favorite 251, which is my favorite microphone, you know, and all the cool plugins that they keep inventing. You know, because Melodyne can do things now that if I talked about them in 1960 would have sounded like science fiction. And finally, of course, there are all those great songwriters and great artists. Having worked with Linda and James and Bonnie and Neil Diamond and Randy and Natalie Merchant and so on, and Diana Ross, it's, you know, I feel privileged. Sitting there and listening to them sing has been an unmitigated privilege and joy. I remember the first time I was in the studio with Diana, you know, we hadn't done a vocal yet, and we were all set up, and I was sitting there, and she started singing, and I couldn't stop myself. I was like, holy shit, she sounds exactly like Diana Ross. Which shouldn't have been surprising, but I mean, I'm somebody who had every Supreme single memorized, and there was that amazing voice, you know. So those voices continue to impress me. And I'm now having the privilege of working with Susanna, whose voice I loved, you know, on all those records and love now. And the album has been a great pleasure. And I thank you for all those nice things you said. It was amazing. So I thank everyone here at Namm. I thank the good fortune that I have in that I'm so far neither deaf nor dead. And thanks above all for the fact that I'm still working, that talented people still ask me to come and help them make a record. And there is literally nothing in the world I would rather be doing than that. I couldn't have done it. I couldn't have done it, certainly, without all of you. I thank very much my own team, Jeff Allen Ross, Keith Putney, who keep everything on track, both musically and organizationally and everything else, and I appreciate that very much. And in particular, I appreciate the recognition given me by all of you. Now, if I may, I'm going to end by actually moving to the other microphone and taking you back to that day in January 1964. So bear with me for a moment. Because on that day, we did cut about 5 tracks. And by the end of the day, there was no doubt in anyone's mind which song was going to be our first single. And it came out a month later and went to #1 all over the world and changed my life forever. So I owe this song a debt of gratitude. And it was a Paul McCartney song that he'd written and left unfinished because John didn't like it. I heard it. The Beatles were not going to record it. And I asked Paul when we had our record deal if we could have it, and he said yes. And that's the song that changed my life forever. So it also does make a very good sing-along. So I'm going to ask all of you if you would join me for this rendition. Now, I recognize that some of you may be thinking, oh my God, this record was #1 60 years ago. You know, how am I possibly supposed to know it? And of course that could be true, but you'll actually find, I bet, that if you start singing, through the mists of time, those of you who are old, and even if those of you who are young might have heard it on the oldie station, some of it